I'm so pleased to have Jennifer Lahl with me today. Jennifer is the new director of Genspect USA, and we just wanted to introduce Jennifer to everyone and just ask a few questions about Genspect USA. So, Jennifer, do you want to explain a little bit about your background?
Sure. I was a pediatric critical care nurse for many years, and I was a little concerned with how I saw medicine sort of going sideways and getting off the ethical track. And so I went back to graduate school and got my master's degree in bioethics. And when I graduated from my master's program, I decided to not return to clinical nursing, but to found a nonprofit called the Center for Bioethics and Culture, which I founded in 2000, many years ago. And last year I stepped down as the president and the founder of, well, I didn't step down as founder. I guess you're always founder. But I stepped down and I had already been quietly working a transition plan out of that role because I knew it was time to pass the baton. And I was looking for kind of a different place to do my work in things that I was interested in. So I approached Stella about joining the advisory board of Genspec, and then one thing led to the next. And now here I am as the new U.S. Director of Genspec.
That's great. And we're very pleased to have you. I guess the other thing that you didn't mention, which I think is worth mentioning, is that you're also a documentary filmmaker, and you made the films, uh, Transmission and The Lost Boys. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that, because I'm sure a lot of people will have already seen those.
Yeah, so we actually, when I was with the CBC, we made 3 films in this space. Transmission, What's the Rush to Reassign Gender? We quickly followed that with the Detransition Diaries, which features young women who thought they were born in the wrong bodies. And then we finished the series, with The Lost Boys, Searching for Manhood. And because I was a pediatric nurse, and a lot of the work I have done in the past has been in the area of assisted reproduction. And what I found out before they block puberty, they offer children what they call fertility preservation. Freeze and bank your egg or sperm or your testicular tissue if you don't have sperm yet, or your ovarian tissue if you don't have eggs yet. And that's when we decided as documentary filmmakers to get into this space of gender, I guess, medicine in scare quotes, because I was really concerned with how can doctors be offering this, knowing what I know about assisted reproductive technology and infertility.
Right. And so that's an interesting point. Do you see any parallels between those two? Maybe you could talk about that a little bit more, about what you observed with.
Yeah, I mean, I do see parallels in that a lot of this is experimental. A lot of this is motivated by profit. In the case of the pediatric population, these are children, young people that have healthy fertility that we are knowingly going to damage. And so we're offering a solution to the damage that we're going to do by the treatment. And we certainly see that in the area of what I call third-party conception, of you're going to use eggs from a young woman who's going to donate or sell her eggs. She's not a patient, she has healthy fertility, and we're going to do something medically that's very lucrative for big fertility, and potentially damage and harm her body. So there's definitely parallels that are driven by money, profit, experimental nature, and using people that have healthy bodies, and in this case, healthy fertility, and damaging that.
Okay. So, just one of the things that I've thought about is the U.S. is kind of the gorilla in the room when it comes to gender medicine, and I'm wondering, as the new director of Genspect USA, are there are there particular policies or changes that you think that we should be working toward to try and begin to address, this kind of out of control situation we're in?
You mean as it relates to children that are being offered gender affirmation therapy?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know it's broader than that, but maybe just starting with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gets back to, first, doctors do no harm. So I think we need to really re-examine, especially in the United States, where medicine is really operated as a consumer-based service. Um, and when I left nursing, I was told to call my patients my customers and my clients, and and what would you like? We're here to serve. Here's our menu. So I think we need to really re-examine what is proper medicine. And certainly a tenet of that, a foundational tenet is first do no harm. In the space of what we're doing, especially with children and young adults, it is really what evidence we do have points to us in the direction of we shouldn't be doing this. So I think, we need to really look at the evidence and have our policies be, driven and functioning within the evidence that we have. And I think if we really did even more studies, not biased studies, not, puff pieces that get into the academic literature, which there's plenty of examples of stuff that gets into Nature and, big other academic journals. And you kind of go, how did this ever make it into this journal? How did this ever pass peer review? So I think that those are some things. And, this isn't really directly related to medicine, but we need to have some kind of justice. And whether that's legal, or we need to have some kind of remedy for people that were told by doctors, this is going to help you, this is not going to harm you. And when in fact that proves not to be the case, there needs to be some kind of a remedy for these people that have been harmed to have justice.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I don't know if you saw, or actually, I know you saw on Twitter because I saw you post about it. But one of the most disturbing things I've seen is there's a little reel of a young woman who appears to have cerebral palsy, who has had a double mastectomy, and I mean, you literally can't understand what she's saying, and there's so many things go through your head about what are the implications of this sort of intervention for someone who already has medical challenges. So it struck me that you have talked about speaking for people who don't have a voice. How do you think how do you think Genspect uh, or how would you like to see Genspect begin to kind of give voice to some of the untold stories that go on in this world?
Well, I think Genspect already has a lot of good foundational, has done a lot of good foundational work. I mean, we have resources for parents. I mean, part of the way we can be a voice for those who have no voice is to help parents who, when they go to get help, they get the kind of help that they're not looking for. They're trying to get help that will protect their child, that will keep their child safe from, these, harmful interventions. So I think and whether that's a voice for those that don't have a voice, I think parents a lot of times feel they don't. They walk in, they're intimidated. Here's the doctor saying, I need to do this. They get that talking point, or else your child will kill themselves, which we know is actually not true. So we can help by being a voice and a buffer and a resource to give parents the language so they can question and they can investigate. We can certainly be that. We're getting ready to do Transition Awareness Day on Capitol Hill in a few months. Maybe we'll talk about that a bit. But, that's a way to give voice to those, because we know the detransitioners, when they speak out, they get a lot of vitriol. Well, you weren't really trans to begin with, or why are you trying to ruin it for the rest of us? And, there's, this is all on you. This is your fault, and go away because you're bad for the messaging. So we can give them a platform Um, I was talking with a parent a couple weeks ago, and her lament was growing that detransition voice so that people that have made the decision to transition, and again, I don't think you can transition, I'm just using the language, that we can give those people um, a, a different narrative. We can present them with maybe their peer group, people in their 20s, people in their teens, people early 30s, that we can welcome them back into the fold, and say there's no shame. I think a lot of times we've done something and then we feel like, oh, we can't undo it because we told everybody, I've changed my name, I've changed my pronouns, I've done all this to my body. There's no going back. I just have to live this lie, even though internally I'm doubting, I'm struggling. And I saw that when I remember one of the young men I interviewed for the Lost Boys, he was doing all that and he's realized inside when he was hanging around with a bunch of girls, he would never be a girl. He didn't think like them. He didn't laugh at the things he laughed at. He just didn't have that je ne sais quoi, the DNA of being a girl. And he felt like he was a poser and he was, an actor in the play. So I think those are things that are just really practical, but really will do a lot of good and be very beneficial to both parents and people thinking about doing this, people who've done it and want to get out of it, and people who want to be spokespeople like those that are going to be on Capitol Hill with us. How can we support them? Because we're asking them to do something really big and hard, to keep replaying this and keep putting themselves out there on the public stage to be heaped on.
Yeah, it's hard because it's almost like people have been through so much, and you're so grateful when they want to speak out, but it's also I can't imagine. I may imagine that it must take a toll. So I wonder, would you want to say a little bit more about Detransition Awareness Day and why this one is a little bit different from the ones that we've had? I mean, for one thing, it's in the U.S. Or we have an event in the U.S. which we haven't had before. But we, maybe you want to say something about some of the different sessions and the different speakers.
Sure. And maybe in the show notes, you can put the link where people can register because it is going to be on Capitol Hill. It's free to attend because, it's the people's house and we can't charge people to come into their own home. So we are excited because it is going to be done on Capitol Hill. We really do hope to attract a lot of people on the Hill that either are legislators or staffers that are working with legislators. We hope we will get the media to join us and cover this. And they cover it fairly. And, we want a lot of detransitioners to come, not just the ones that are going to be speaking that day, but others to be in the audience because we want to demonstrate that this is not 4 or 5 people. This is many more people, and it's a growing number of people. And there's many more that aren't public at all. They won't come, but they'll be watching. And so it's built as a briefing because we know people on Capitol Hill don't have a whole day to give to conferences. And it will be 4 different panels. And the big focus is, what do our lawmakers need to hear? What do our lawmakers need to know? What do our lawmakers need to know and hear so they can make things better? And so the first panel will be a medical panel, and we'll have Dr. Etan Hein, who's the general surgeon down in Texas, who blew the whistle in Texas Children's, Dr. Patrick Lappert, who's a plastic surgeon, because plastic surgeons are needed to do a lot of these surgeries, and Dr. Patrick Hunter, who's a pediatrician who's been very active in this space, trying to protect his young patient demographic. Then followed by that will be a panel of detransitioners, men and women, all different stories. And then after that, we'll have a legal panel, which will be Sean Thierry, who is the Texas state legislator who left the Democratic Party because she saw what they were voting for in the space of transgender care. Aaron Friday, who's a board member of Genspect USA, will be one of our lawyers on that panel. And then the last panel will be on social media and the role that social media plays in sort of trapping these kids and exposing them to ideas that are perhaps harmful or they're too young to really understand and be critical thinkers. And that will be Claire Morrell, who lives and works on Capitol Hill, and she's been already involved in legislation on the Hill as it relates to protections of social media with young people. And Tiffany Justice will be, Moms for Liberty will be on that panel, sort of talking what needs to happen in the classroom, perhaps, So again, it will be 4 different panels, but all what do our lawmakers need to hear and know and do?
That's great. And the other thing that I was going to ask about is we know how polarized things have become. But it does seem like the kind of the ice is breaking, and there are more people from both sides of the political spectrum who are expressing some concern. And I noticed that the sponsorship for Detrans Awareness Day is bipartisan. And I'm just wondering if you have any views on where things are going. I mean, does that sound accurate? Do you think things are loosening up, or am I just imagining?
Well, I have a couple of things to say, and I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't have any secret knowledge here. Um, and and a lot of things will depend on what happens when the new administration comes in, and what will happen with the Skermeti trial, case before the Supreme Court, and all those kind of things. But yeah, there are cracks. We've seen Democratic lawmakers, I think one recently in New York State, your state, that said something about, I don't really want boys in the girls' bathroom or boys playing on girls' sports. Now, maybe this is a tell because he took all kinds of flack for saying that. So it sounds like he's kind of softening his stance and sort of backpedaling. So that makes me think, well, maybe it isn't really a good crack in the shift. However, I do think in the public, when would you have ever thought that this issue would be part of the presidential election? It's not the border, it's not the economy, it's not wars, it's not those things. We actually had a serious social issue that became part of the debates around who's going to be in the White House or who's going to be the new governor, who's going to get that Senate seat. So I think that's a very hopeful that the American public heard that and they voted in a way that really is encouraging to me.
That's that. I think I hope you're right. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if you have maybe do you want to say a little bit more about where you see Genspect making a difference in these debates?
Yeah. Well, first, I mean, Genspect USA is brand new. We're still a baby little seed. And so we have a lot of work to do in 2025 to say, hey, America, we're here. And hey, America, we're here to do X, Y, and Z. You want to partner with us. You want to join us. You want to, be part of the Genspect USA party. Maybe we should have swag or shirts. Everybody's got shirts or something. So that, we're just starting from ground zero, which on one hand is really exciting to me as somebody who founded an organization, because you really do sort of get to cast the vision and the mission and sort of set the tone. So, we have some work to do with just branding and messaging so people know who we are and what we stand for. I'm hopeful that the event on Capitol Hill, which will be a very big event, well, it should be, it's on Capitol Hill. And then we're going to quickly follow it with a September event in New Mexico that will, Stella's vision has always been to sort of follow WPAP meetings. So 1 year we were in Denver, last year we were in Lisbon, and this year in New Mexico will be the US PAP annual meeting. And so we're going to do a parallel thing. So those kind of 2 events will sort of elevate our profile and let people know that we're here and this is what we're doing and we're serious. I mean, you do a bang up job with the Substack. And so we already know that there's a growing number of followers who read that. We use that Substack to ask readers to help fund Detransition Day. And I was very encouraged because part of the work we were going to do is if we can afford to do it, so we have to raise the money. And I was very encouraged to see that the Substack readership responded and very generously. So we know that we have a base, and it's always good to have some kind of a base of support. Um, so I suppose the sky is a limit, but I think this year we just really want to focus on setting our vision, getting our strategic plan, having these two really good events, and growing the readership.
Yeah, it's, you're making me think of one of the things that people have always said to me about Genspect is they've always said to me, the good thing about Genspect is that we're able to bring in lots of people from different perspectives. And so in Portugal, we had social scientists, we had lawmakers, we had a whole variety of people, and the Denver conference, which was the year before last, which I didn't get to go to. I was like watching it live, from Rome. But it really kind of brought people from all sorts of different regions, all sorts of different walks of life. And so I'm hoping that we can do the same thing in New Mexico and, kind of moving down the line. And one of the nice things about Substack is that you get a sense of what the community for Genspect is like, and they are so good and they are so committed. And a lot of them are American, and I think it's really great that we, have kind of a fledgling organization here so that we can begin to, I guess, kind of make a difference. Um, so I came up with questions. I have the questions, but one of the things that I'm curious about is when you talk to people who have kind of gone down the rabbit hole with this, it seems like there's a kind of evolution that you go through where you sort of go in and you've got good faith and you kind of you're kind of very open-minded, and then you go down the rabbit hole and you're like, oh hell no. But I'm wondering how did you is there anything in your personal evolution that was there a moment when you thought I have to do something about this?
Well, for me, the tipping point really was knowing that they were offering children before they blocked their puberty fertility preservation. And even if they had gone through puberty and already had, that stage of development, they were still offered fertility preservation. And I've always been watching this space because I watch what's happening in medicine. What motivates most of my work is justice, and seeing the injustice that's done to people, whether they be adults or whether they be children or parents or whatever. So that was sort of the tipping point as far as actively getting involved. I was already on the bus. I was already a believer of the vision of Genspect. I never believed that you could transition. I never believed that sexual reassignment surgery did anything to make you the opposite sex. It just modified your body, like getting piercings or tattoos doesn't turn you into something other. But I have seen, and just because I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I live in ground zero of this belly of the beast. I mean, I'm in a sanctuary state. Everybody's madder than hell with Gavin Newsom for a gazillion reasons, and most recently the fires. So I'm surrounded by people who think I'm nuts for doing the work I do or don't agree with me. However, I can usually find a touch point or a connection, whether it's sports, whether it's bathrooms, whether it's, because everybody's like, oh, just live and let live, live and let live. And why do you care? And, this is going to help this person, what's it to you? But, if you sort of just start poking at that, I try to be a good listener so I know who I'm speaking with.
Mm-hmm.
And what are their priorities or what motivates them or drives their thinking. Is it, I can say things like, we have a couple hundred men in women's prisons right now. Incarcerated women go to bed every night worrying if they're going to get raped by this fully intact male who says he's a woman. And some people will go, oh, that's not right. Or sometimes that you walk into a bathroom with your little child and there's a grown man in there and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. You can do that, but you do that at home. Yeah. I just really think you can't have a one size fits all talking point because then you're just talking at people. Ask questions. Why do you think that? Or, because some people might not know that it's doesn't work. Some people might not know that they're not going to kill themselves. And there's no research that proves that they've just been told that. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the parallels I kind of see between like, because I know you don't work on surrogacy, um, and this is just, people are so compassionate, and it becomes very emotionally charged, and it makes it sometimes, it's a delicate uh balance because, I mean, I think you got to recognize that people are coming from a good place. Um, but, uh, but the more you find out about this, the more you understand that there's a very grave price to pay for making these interventions. I mean, for everyone, but particularly for children. And it it seems like a very very bad. Well, it is a very very bad idea
yeah.
to to do this to kids in particular. So I see a parallel there, and I'm so glad that we have you because you're so good at sort of putting the common sense uh spin, not spin, but articulation of what we're trying to deal with. So I've run out of questions.
Well, just add a few other things. What is, my own personal view, which I know that this is not shared by everybody who's working in this space. I don't believe that medicine should be doing this to adults either. I'm not somebody who's going to support and champion once you turn 21, if you want your double mastectomy, if you want your vaginoplasty, if you want your phalloplasty, then that's all well and good. Because I do see that as not good medicine. Just, when we have other examples, like I was talking with somebody on X the other day, and, I was saying something because, there's that condition where people think that they should be amputees, and there's actually been doctors that have amputated healthy limbs. And he's like, well, that's different. I'm like, well, it's really not, because you're basically asking the doctor to do something to healthy bodies because of something that's in your head. So, and I think it will be interesting. I said this at a event you and I were both at recently, that it will be interesting if in the next year in the US, we become much more like our European country friends who have really pulled back on doing this to minors. So if we are successful to do that, what will happen to the different coalitions that have been working to protect children from puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and surgeries? Because there's some people in our coalition that think if you're an adult, you can do whatever you want. And, I was impacted by, Richie Herron is in my Lost Boys film. He was somebody who did this, much older. He wasn't a teenager. He wasn't a young adult. He was much older. And, he goes on and on about all his comorbidities. And I do agree that, you don't want somebody to be anorexic at 35 and say, yeah, you're fat. Let's do a gastric bypass because you're an adult now. You can,
Yeah.
well, you're not, you don't need that. So that will be interesting to see in the new year. And then I did want to comment on the bipartisan. I still think in the United States, because we did get sponsors for Detransition Awareness Day, and a few are on the more of the left, versus many of the sponsors are more on the right. And that's just the reality of the landscape. So I think is more, I remember being called by somebody when we were starting to do our pre-publicity of the event. This is just a bunch of right-wing organizations. I said, find me a left-wing organization that supports us. I'd be happy to have a conversation with them. But, I don't think the HRC is going to sponsor our event. I don't think GLAAD's going to sponsor our event. I don't think George Soros is going to write us a big check. We're happy to work with people on the left, the right, the middle, libertarians, I don't care. But it's finding people that, believe what we believe. And that's, hopefully that will change too, as, more and more efforts are done with educating and informing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's like the thing about children is that anybody who's had a child or who's raised a child or spent a lot of time around children is that there really is kind of a hard stop there, because if you know them, you know that they're different. And the whole kind of trajectory, since the 60s has been about personal autonomy. And, when you actually know about kids, there comes a point where you're just like, no. And I think it's interesting because it does kind of raise questions about adulthood and the sort of responsibility we have to other people. I mean, I remember talking to a woman who was this in my kind of crazy. It wasn't crazy, but I was with a bunch of squatters and anarchists at one point. Anyway, and I'm talking to a woman who was mad because she was like, yeah, I guess maybe like 21, and the National Health Service wouldn't sterilize her because she was like, wow, I don't want to have kids. I never want to have kids. And I ran into her a few years later, and she's like, oh, I have kids now. And and it's just like, when you start to think back on your 20s, and it really does seem, it does seem kind of crazy, that we just keep trying to push things younger and younger. So anyway, I think you're right. I think that's an important thing to think about is what happens to young adults.
Yeah, and we all need gatekeepers. I mean, the police is my gatekeeper. I can't speed and drive as fast as I want without a seatbelt on while I'm texting. And to me, medicine in this issue, medicine is one of the biggest gatekeepers. To say, no, this is medically not indicated. No, this is medically not proven to do that which you think it's going to do. Here's how we can help you. Here's how medicine can work with you, and whether that be through psychiatry or psychology or whatever, and so we all, no matter what our age is, especially for parents, because parents are getting one message that says you're a horrible parent because you're not affirming, but the parent's intuition, and I've read so much of your writing, we have to trust ourselves as parents. And we doubt ourselves because we have all these, experts and people in white coats with big degrees on their wall, telling us this is, the science is settled. You need to do this. So, yeah. So we're here to do our part.
Great. So I don't think I have anything else. Should we just leave it at that? And then I'm hoping that we'll be able to come back and maybe have a question and answer session. We're doing all sorts of experiments with Substack where we'll have live chats, particularly during Detrans Awareness Day, since we can't fit everybody who wants to come into the room. And so this is just the beginning.
That's right. Look out.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Nancy. It was wonderful to chat with you.